here.
It's like conceptually, I mainly had a doubt in My Hill Nero, like the whole relation.
Okay. So
Like
shall I open? Yeah. So tell
I'm
me.
like I got a little confused basically.
Okay. So I will try and open the slides of Myhill-Nero theorem. I don't know which lecture this is. T something. It will be the last one. T7. Okay.
It's T7. Yes,
Yes.
there's only one
T7.
lecture left.
Right. Right. Okay. So Myhill-Nero theorem. Okay. Basically relies on a definition of a uh, of of a relation called right linear congruence. Okay. And the right linear congruence is defined as follows. Where is the definition? Language induced equivalence, right? This is also called right linear congruence, or language induced equivalence. So this is the definition. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. So, given any language R, maybe context, maybe regular, may not be regular, right? We and given two arbitrary strings X and Y belonging to sigma star, we check if they are equivalent. If we call them to be, equivalent under this language induced equivalence, or what is called right linear uh, uh, equivalence, if the following property holds. That is, you append X with some arbitrary Z and you append Y with the same Z. Then both of them should land up in R, or both of them should remain outside R. That was the idea, right? Uh, so what
No, sir,
happens?
can you go over that again? I mean, so language induced equivalence and right linear congruence are the same.
Same thing, right? They are the
What
two
about right
alternative.
congruence and right linear congruence?
Right linear congruence is same as language induced congruence. That is
No,
what
what
we
about
mean.
right congruence without the linear?
Yeah, right congruence is a bit different. Right congruence is part of this property. See this, here we call two strings equivalent if they satisfy this property, right? Huh? If two
Yes.
strings satisfy this property, they are said to be equivalent. Right congruence, don't worry about right congruence so much. We won't need it. Okay? But since I have it on my slide, right congruence is an arbitrary equivalence relation over sigma star, which has the following property. If X is equivalent to Y, then X extended with A is equivalent to Y extended with A. And so by induction, you can then extend it with another B. So X extended with any Z is equivalent to Y extended with this thing. So, right linear congruence is if and only if. Here, we have only an implication, right? In right congruence,
Yes, sir.
right? And there is no R there in this definition of right congruence.
Yes, so this is a more refined variant of that.
So this is so many kinds of different equivalences will actually be right congruent. In particular, if you have, for example, no word is equivalent to any other word, so it is only equivalent to itself. This is also an equivalence relation, right? Hello, Arvind?
No, I mean that was not clear.
Okay, so let me open simultaneously this thing, and let me start a new document. So what I'm saying is, see, over sigma star, I can define various equivalences. For example, one equivalence is that everything in sigma star is equivalent to everything, right? Which means there is only one equivalence class, right? So this is the coarsest possible equivalence on sigma star possible. Another is that every word is equivalent to only itself. X equivalent to Y implies X equal to Y. So if X and Y are distinct, they are not equivalent. So how many equivalence classes will I have? As many as words in sigma star, right? Which is infinite, right? So there can be many different equivalences, right? You get
Yes, sir.
that, Arvind?
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
But
Not
here
all.
we
Hello?
are defining every word with respect to the acceptance and rejection only, right?
No,
In
there
our
is no,
sense.
here there is no acceptance or rejection. Some equivalence partitioning of sigma star is given to you. There is no R here. There is no acceptance or rejection here. Here we are saying that somehow we are given an equivalence over sigma star. So we are studying algebraic properties of ways in which we want to partition sigma star. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, given such an equivalence, it is said to be right congruence if it has the following property. So not every equivalence partitioning will have this property. We say, suppose we divide this into two classes, odd length words and even length words. Okay. Agreed? So I have two classes on sigma star. I can always divide it into two classes like this. So two odd length words will be equivalent to each other and two even length words will be equivalent to each other. When is a word said to be right invariant? When is an equivalence said to be right invariant? So this is one equivalence, right? Another was the identity, which means word is equivalent only to itself, right? And the third was everything was equivalent to everything. So here we had two classes. When everything is equivalent to everything, we have only one class. Sigma star becomes a single equivalence class. Right? Now, what is right congruence? Not all equivalence relations are right congruences. So right congruence are those equivalences such that if x is equivalent to y, this implies that xa is equivalent to ya for all a. So if two are equivalent, if you extend both the strings with a single letter, they will remain equivalent. And because these two are equivalent, you extend them further with a letter. So this will also imply that for all z, xz equivalent to yz, right? So for example, if you take this odd even equivalence, it will satisfy this right congruence property. Because take two words x and y which both have odd length, right? You extend them by one letter, then both of them will have even letters and so they will remain equivalent. So you see the congruence property?
Yes, sir. In this problem, it's clear. Like
So
if you append
congruence
a letter
property
to the end,
says
it will
that if you
switch.
take any two words and if you extend them with a common string, you should go to the same class. Not necessarily the same word, but to the same class. So this will take you here and this will take you here. It cannot happen that this will, what is not allowed is drawn here. That you extend it with some z, you remain here, but you extend this with z, you go into this class. So you go to different classes on extension with the same string. That is called right congruence, right?
Yes, sir. So this is a
Now,
property of an equivalence
right.
relation, or
If you take
is this a necessary?
no, this is a proper no, this is not a necessary property of equivalence. Some equivalences will not satisfy this.
Yes, sir. Okay, so far it's clear.
Yeah. Now, if you take the words where every word is equivalent only to itself, that is also right congruent. Because x is only equivalent to x and to nothing else. When you extend this left hand by an a, it is same as extending this thing by an a. So it still remains right congruent, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now the point is, so this right congruence will hold for many different kinds of equivalences, including the finest partitioning of sigma star, where every word is partitioned into its own equivalence class. No two words are combined into one class, right? That will also be right congruent. We
So
just saw.
like beyond a limit, like if I partition this pre-existing equivalence class further into a few more equivalence classes, then you're telling me that all the other classes will also be right congruent.
How do you mean by that? I did not get that fully.
Like in this given equivalence class, we have odd even
Yes, yes,
classes. If
yes,
I further split this into
yes.
mod 4,
Mod 4, no, with whatever is a Z4 group, you know, what is the length modulo 4, right?
yes,
Yeah, so you get 4 classes.
and this will always be right congruent.
No, 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 no. You know, you may partition this in a funny way, this odd even, such that odd is partitioned into two classes like, forget even also. Suppose odd is partitioned into two parts, such that there are words x and y here, which are equivalent. But if you you know, both are of odd length, but if you extend this with an A, you know, it may go to this class, but if you extend this with an A, it goes here. It can happen. So it depends on how you are partitioning. If you do a kind of bad partitioning, then this property will not be true. Right?
Okay. Yes.
So I think we are just saying what is a healthy partition, that it should preserve equivalence classes. That is what we are saying. Okay?
Yes. So the definition is clear. Now, how do I relate this to my
Right. Now what happens is, we saw that every DFA defines an equivalence over every finite state automaton defines an equivalence class, you know. So we give that definition, machine equivalence, you know, machine equivalent. Suppose you are given a DFA A. Look at this slide, Arvind. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we said two words are equivalent if starting from initial state on X as well as on Y, you wind up in the same state. That is, both X and starting with initial state, both words X and Y lead you to the same state. Okay.
Yes, this
is what I call as machine equivalence.
Yes, the definition is clear.
Yeah. Now this machine equivalence happens to be right congruent also. It's a good kind of equivalence. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And how many equivalence classes will a DFA machine induced equivalence have? As many as the number of reachable states. Right?
So that is the minimum.
No, it depends. No, it is not necessary, because, you know, for the same language, you can have DFAs of different size.
Yes.
Yeah, but every DFA gives you partitioning of sigma star into as many equivalence classes as number of states.
Okay. So these equivalence classes are defined for the given DFA.
Right. That's why it's called machine induced equivalence. So
yes,
this.
Sir. That is also fine.
That's why this equivalence is suffixed with this automaton name A. So yes. It's specific to the automaton which is given to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now this also happens to be right congruence. Okay. Now I go back to that example that you gave, that let me go back to this. So we had this odd even partition, right?
Yes.
And we further divided into 4 classes. So odd got factored into 2, you know, those when modulo 4 gives you remainder 1, or it gives you remainder 1 or remainder 3. And the even gets into 0 or 2, right?
Yes.
So we have 4 classes. Now, so you know, this is an equivalence relation which is finer than the previous one. It has more equivalence classes. It's obtained by splitting the previous one. So previous one is called coarser and this new one is called finer, which is obtained by further partitioning classes into subclasses. Okay?
Yes.
Right. So there can be, you know, many different ways of partitioning, you know, this is, so we say that we refine the original odd even equivalence into this modulo 4 equivalence, because we get a finer equivalence now. This is the terminology. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now it so turns out that the minimal automaton that you can define for a DFNO will give you the coarsest equivalence. And the another automaton, if it recognizes the same language, will refine that equivalence. This is a property that we prove. This is what is Myhill-Nerod theorem. So let me show.
So what does Myhill-Nerod say? Like,
yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you.
Coarsest equivalence class exists.
Which one?
Like Myhill-Nerod theorem.
I'll state it for you. No, I'll state it for you. Just give me a minute, because I think so. Then there is this one last idea, language induced equivalence. You know, so you are given some language R, you know, maybe a regular language R, okay, or a context free language R, right? We define with respect to that R, just as automaton induced an equivalence which was a congruence, this language R will also induce an equivalence which will be a congruence. Okay, so here there is no automaton, we only have the language. Is that clear?
So, I mean, in the previous case also, a DFA would give one certain language, right?
Yeah, and the machine equivalence that we define may be different from this language equivalence that you get for that machine. You will see.
Yes, so we are coming in from two different directions. That is.
Yes, yes. One we are coming from the language of the automaton, and one we are coming from the automaton directly.
Yes.
And the result is that the automaton equivalence refines this language induced equivalence. So language induced equivalence is always the coarsest. It gives you the fewest equivalence classes. This is the main content of Myhill-Nerode theorem. So first you have to understand this definition of language equivalence. You know, it's just congruence working in both directions. It says that two strings are, are equivalent, or language right linear congruence equivalent. If for all z, xz belongs to R if and only if yz belongs to R. Right? This is the definition.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is the theorem? The theorem is, this is just the definition. So I gave an example. Suppose you got a raised to n, b raised to n. What are the language induced equivalence classes? So we had solved this in the class. Each a raised to k is an equivalence class for every k. So a raised to 0, that is only the epsilon word, is a class by itself. A raised to 1 is an equivalence class by itself. A raised to 2 is an equivalence class by itself. Why is this everyone a raised to k and a raised to k plus 1 in different classes? Because a raised to can be extended by b raised to k to take you to the language, but a raised to k plus 1 extended with b raised to k will not take you to the language, right? So a raised to k has to be distinguished from a raised to k plus 1 or a raised to k plus anything else. You see that, Arvind?
Yes, sir.
Right. There are also classes like this, a raised to n plus k and b raised to n. So, we'll give you a class, which is called HK. So if you got a word AAABB and AAB, can you write down here? AAABB and AAAB are congruent. Why is that? Because somehow the difference in number of A's and B's is 2, right? Hello?
Yes. So if you add
2 B's, then you will be in R, and if you add anything other than 2 B's, you will not be in R. So there is no string which will distinguish this two. And if you add an A after that, you will never be in the R, because my language is A raised to n, B raised to n. So these HKs are also equivalence classes.
Yes, sir.
So this is how you define. And since for every K we have a GK class, and for every K you have an HK class, the number of classes is infinite. Right? Is that also clear?
So yeah. We have like K is
some integer constant.
No. N is infinite, like N we have infinite.
No. What both I'm saying, both are infinite together, and GK is a different class from HK class, because yes, GK can be extended by A, but HK cannot be extended by A to ever get you into the language. So GK has to be distinguished from HK.
Yes.
So for every natural number, GK gives you a different class and HK gives you a different class, and GK is different from HK. So I've got infinitely many classes, right?
Yes.
So we have got infinitely many language induced equivalence classes. Okay. So I think I'm sorry, in the lecture I've used the terminology language induced equivalence, and in the homework I'm saying right linear congruence, right?
Both yes, sir. And also this example was a little confusing for me, so now it's clear.
Yeah, no. So both these terminologies are same, Right linear congruence and language induced equivalence are the same, and both are used in literature. Okay. Yes, now notice that this was a context free language. It was not a regular language. Right?
Yes.
And it had infinitely many classes. So what Myhill-Nerode theorem says is, I defined you this coarseness. Coarser equivalence is one which has fewer equivalence classes. Finer one is one that takes the previous equivalence and splits it into further classes, right? So Myhill-Nerode theorem, we will not do the middle one. So we will just know if a language is regular, that is it has a DFA, giving the equivalence, machine equivalence, equivalent A. If and only if this language induced equivalence has got finitely many equivalence classes. The index of an equivalence relation is number of its equivalence classes. So this is the theorem. 1 is equivalent to 3 and 3 is equivalent to 1. Okay. So a regular language will always give you, given the right language induced equivalence, it will give you only finitely many classes. This is trivial because if the language is regular, it has a DFA. The DFA has finitely many states. This machine induced equivalence has also got finitely many classes, right? Correct? And yes. This language induced equivalence is actually coarser than that. It has, same or lesser number of equivalence classes. This is something that we proved. Here we said that if two things are machine equivalent, two strings X and Y are machine equivalent, then they are also language induced equivalent. In blue, I have written this as a 2 proof. And then you can read the proof in Cosen, but the essential part is here. Okay. So you can read it up, Arvind.
Yes. Okay.
So the idea is that going from 1 to 3 is trivial once you prove this property written below. Right? Because language use equivalence gives you this. Now, if there is an equivalence, this language induced equivalence has got finitely many equivalence classes, then the language is regular. How do we prove? We will design an automaton, finite state automaton, which will accept that R. Okay, and that is what was done in the next slide. What we do is each equivalence class becomes a state. Okay, because you have got a language, it will have some number of equivalence classes, and we have said it is a finite index, so it has got finitely many equivalence classes, right?
Yes, and each of them becomes a state, and we can construct the DFA.
Yeah, so the initial the epsilon ka equivalence class becomes the start state, and given an equivalence class of a string X, extending its way is same as equivalence class of string XA. Okay. So this is the definition of the DFA, and it's an easy proof that this will also recognize the same language as R. Okay. So in this sense, the going by this, let me go to the previous this thing. Going by this, since we said that the machine equivalence has got same or fewer classes as language induced equivalence, this language induced equivalence ka automaton is minimal. There cannot be a smaller automaton than this. Okay. Yes. So this proves existence of minimum sized automaton for regular languages, and in fact that Hopcroft algorithm finds the same equivalence. We had done finds the same minimum automaton. So there is a unique minimum automaton for every regular language, and that Hopcroft algorithm, if you give me an automaton for the language, by minimizing it using Hopcroft algorithm, I'll get the same automaton. This is the upshot of Myhill-Nerode theorem. Okay. So we are done with this. Any more? This is okay?
Yes, sir. This is clear.
Hi, who else is there? We have got several other people. Any other doubts, students? So one thing I should point out in the homework, I have called something called as right linear congruence. Okay. This is same as language induced equivalence. I'll send out a note saying this. But don't get confused in this first homework 2. Let me show you homework 2. Okay, in homework 2, in several questions here. Okay, I call here, sorry, I use here terminology right linear congruence equivalence R for a given language R. This is same as language induced equivalence. So whenever I say right linear congruence, I mean language induced equivalence. Both terminologies are used in literature. I'm sorry, I use this right linear congruence here. Okay, right linear congruence means same as language induced equivalence, and we calculated one for a raised to n, b raised to n today. Okay, so that is what I mean. In future, I will use language induced equivalence only. I will not use right linear congruence. So I will, please correct this terminology. Both are correct. Both are used in papers, but the one we have used in the class was language induced equivalence in place of right linear congruence. Okay, no confusion there. Uh, so there are a few questions in the homework which deal with finding the equivalence classes for a given language R in its language induced equivalence, and we just calculated it for a raised to n, b raised to n. We can also calculate it for a star, b star. So shall we do that? I think, let me, if there are no questions, can I solve a few questions from homework 2? Please speak up. Do you have
Sir, I
any
have
questions?
a question from like the CFL part. So can I ask it after this, after the
Yes,
homework?
afterwards, when we come to it. So other students, Eshu or Prashant or Rani or Sujit, do you have any questions, doubts about, in finite state automata, we did minimization of finite automata, and we did pumping lemma, and we did Myhill-Nerode theorem. Okay, three things we did in homework 2. Any doubts there? Or shall we solve some questions?
Yes,
Yes,
sir. I
Rani?
will solve questions from homework.
Okay, so let's go to the homework questions. I mean, if you have doubts in between, please feel free to ask. Okay, so this I will minimize. I should have. Okay, so I will remove this. We don't need to keep this. And let me. There should be tutorial dot. I'm in lectures. I should be in exams. There should be a tutorial. There is no tutorial. Oh, what's happening? Where is tutorial? Okay, let me open this. Let me say.
We have homework.
No, I have tutorial 2. Okay, fine. So I have this homework 2 first question, which gives you a DFA in table form. Here is the DFA in table form. It has got states numbered 0 to 6. So 7 states and 2 letter alphabet A and B. And this is the transition table. From state 0 on A, you go to state 3. From state 0 on B, you go to 2. Right? So this is the DFA. And what we are also asked to do is to minimize this automaton. Okay? So question is clear? Rani? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So how do we do it? We have to find out which states are equivalent, and then we have to group those two equivalent states into a single state. This is called the quotienting construction. So the first thing we have to do is which states are equivalent, and for that we use the Hopcroft algorithm, right? Partition refinement algorithm, for which we build a table. But before we build the table, we find out if there are any states which are not reachable from the initial state. So how do we do that? Starting with state 0. So first is reachable states, right? So unreachable states you find out and remove them from the table. So what are unreachable states? From 0 you can reach 3 and 2 on some letter, right? So 3 and 2 are reachable. From 3 and 2 you can reach 2, 6 and 1. So 1, 2, 3 and 6 are reachable now, right? Now from 6 you can reach 5 and 0. So 5 is also reachable. And that finishes my set of reachable states. So you can keep growing your set of reachable states, from 0, which is the initial state, I can reach 3 and 2. From 3, I can reach 2 and 1. So 1 also comes in. 3 was already there. Right? From 2, I can reach 2 and 6. So 6 comes in. From 6, I can reach 5 and 0. Right? 0 is already there. From 5, I can reach 5 and 3, which is already there. So now I can't add anything more. So this state 4, which was there in the table, is an unreachable state. There is no way on no string from initial state I can ever reach 4. So is it clear how to find out what are the reachable states in a DFA? I hope this is clear. And so this state 4 will be removed because you can never reach it. It's a useless state. Okay. So we found what are the set of unreachable states, which happens to be 4. Unreachable 4. And now we make a table of the remaining states which are reachable. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6. 4 is not there. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5 and 6. And then the diagonal elements are always equivalent because 0 is equivalent to itself. I mean, this is the basic property of an equivalence relation. So there we put dot. They will always remain equivalent. Okay. We are trying to distinguish pairs of states. So for example, this cell denotes the pair 0, state 0 and state 1. Also it denotes 1 and 0 because this equivalence relation is symmetric. So this denotes 0 and 1. And we, in different phases, we try to distinguish as many pairs of states as we can. So what is the initial phase 0? Initial phase 0. So in phase 0, we distinguish final states from non-final states. 0 and 1 both are final, so we cannot distinguish them. Do you see why we can't distinguish 0 and 1? Because both are final. 0 and 2 we can distinguish because initially, because 0 is final and 2 is not final. So I'll put a tick here and put a 0 here, saying I'm in the 0th or the initial phase itself. I'm distinguishing 0 and 2 because one of them is in the pair 0 to 2. 0 is final and 2 is non-final. If one of them is final and the other is non-final, we put a tick saying this 2 can be distinguished by the string epsilon. Epsilon string will take 0 to final state and it will take 2 to non-final state. So there is a string which is separating these two, right? So this we took. 0, 3, do we put a tick in the initial phase? Sujit? What do you think? So now we are considering 0, 3. Would you like to try? Hello, I think Sujit is not reachable. Prashant, you want to try? I'll help you. Don't worry. Prashant? Okay. Eshu? Okay. Rani, it comes back to you.
Yes, sir. We have to tick that.
So we tick that again in the initial phase because 0 is final, 3 is non-final. In fact, all of this, will be ticked, right? Because 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all are non-final and 0 is final. Okay, and this remains unticked. Similarly, 1, 2, do we tick?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 1 and again everything below because 1 is final and everything below is non-final, right? 2, 3 we don't tick because both are non-final. We don't tick in phase 0. We don't tick, right? So this is the initial phase which I have put by tick with _0 saying in phase 0 this has been done. Now phase 1. In phase 1, what do? We take any unmarked square such as 0, 1. Okay, so I will put it in black because to show it better. Okay, so I have got pair 0, 1. Now 0, 1 on letter A goes to what pair? 0 on A goes to 3 and 1 on A also goes to 3. So this goes to pair 3, 3, which is not ticked. 3, 3 can never be ticked. It is marked with dot. So 0, 1 is not distinguished by A. Now I do 0, 1 on a B. So what does it take me to? 0, 1 on a B takes me to 2, 5, right? 0 it takes to 2 and 1 it takes to 5. 2, I go to the square 2, 5, it is unmarked. So this is also unmarked and this is also unmarked, which means 0, 1 remains unmarked because neither A nor B distinguished it yet. Okay, so this remains unmarked. What about 2, 3? So let's try 2, 3. 2, 3 on an A goes to what pair, Arvind?
It goes to 2, 2.
Yeah, which can never be. So this remains unmarked, right? On an A. On a B, where does it go? 2, 3?
6, 1, which can be differentiated.
6, 1. 6, 1 is already, or 1, 6, which is 6, 1 is same as 1, 6. So this is already ticked. So this is a marked pair, 6, 1. And so this one we will tick in phase 1. So I will tick it in black. Phase 1 this gets ticked. What about 2, 5? So once it's marked with a, sorry, 2, 5,
2, 5 can't be separated in this case.
because 2 goes to on an A goes to 2 and 5 on an A goes to 5. 2 on a B goes to 6 and 5 on a B goes to 3. So we get 3, 6, which is this, which is also unmarked. So we can't mark 2, 5, right? What about 2, 6?
2, 6 can be separated with B.
Yeah, because it goes to 6, 0, which is ticked already. So this is marked in phase 1. What about 3, 6? 2, 5 is unmarked and 1, 0 is unmarked. So this remains unmarked, right? 3, 6 remains unmarked.
Yes, sir.
5, 6? 3, 0 is
separated using B.
Right. So in phase 1, I got 3 new ticks. Huh? Now I have to begin again. 0, 1, can it be marked? It can't be marked. You will see. 0, 1 cannot be marked. 3, 3 and 2, 5. 2, 5 is not yet marked. What about 2, 5?
Again, can't be marked yet.
Can't be marked. And what about 3, 6?
It cannot be marked.
2, 5 and 1, 0. It can't be marked. So we have 3 equivalences. 0 equivalent to 1. We have got 2 equivalent to 5. And we have got 3 equivalent to 6. So we get...
So that's one more empty box.
Which one?
3 and 5.
Can be marked also.
5, 3.
Yes, and that can be separated.
That is
in
5. It
previous
can be
phase.
separated now, right? In which phase?
First phase.
In the first phase. Yeah, this is also marked. Right. So you got 3. That is what I said. That, you know, if I draw this, I've got 0 equivalent, state equivalent to 1. I have got 2 equivalent to 5. And I've got 5 equivalent to 2 equivalent to 5, and I've got 3 equivalent to 6, right? So the rows for 0 and 1 can be combined into 1, 2 and 5 can be combined into 1, and 3 and 6 can be combined into 1. Okay? So as a result of this equivalence, I can draw 3-state automaton. Okay? So you can draw it, you know, 3-state automaton. And you know, this equivalence class 0, 1, okay, on an A, we'll go to the equivalence class of 3, which is same as equivalence class of 6. Okay, so it will go to the equivalence class 3, 6. 0, 1 will go to that. And on a B, it will go to the equivalence class of 2, 5. Is that clear how you construct this? So this is how you have to construct the automaton, and having this will be guaranteed to be the minimum automaton for this, for equivalent to this automaton. Okay. This is Hofcroft's partition refinement algorithm to find equivalences, and then we do quotient by combining equivalent states into 1. So that is my exercise. That is my homework exercise 1. Okay, that was 1. There are additional practice questions in Cozen if you want to try. Okay. Okay. Any questions regarding this, or we move to the next exercise? Okay, no more questions are there. Okay, this is my regular language, and the question is find the language induced equivalence classes for this language. Okay. So there are 2 ways to do this. One is by guessing, or one is by constructing the minimum DFA for this. So let's try to construct a DFA for this, or let's try to do this directly. So what will be the equivalence class of the string epsilon? My claim is that epsilon cannot be distinguished from AA. Why? Because
add an A also, it will be in the same state.
Right. So Rani, are you able to see this? That if you extend epsilon with any string, it will go to R, then this will A will also go to R on the same string. For example, if you extend epsilon with a B, it will be a language which belongs to R. If you extend A with a B, it will belong to R. If you extend with a BA, it will not be in R. And if you extend this with BA also, it will not be in R. So all strings will keep you there. So basically, what will be the equivalence class of epsilon, Arvind? Can you guess?
Sir, about that, like notationally, I don't know if it's correct, but I wrote A par K, where K can be
Yeah,
anything, and that will
which is
fall in the same class.
A star, right?
So we can write A star itself.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's a set of strings, no? So equivalence class of A is this set of strings, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, what is equivalent of, so all epsilon in A are equivalent. What about a string like AAB? What is its equivalence class?
That is a separate class. I mean, that is not equivalent to the previous one. So
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
what will be all the strings in it? So first of all, AAB is same as A star B because all A's are equivalent, right? So A star B is same as AAB ka class. Huh?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, what about string like this? A star B and A star BB. Are these equivalent?
Yes, sir.
They are equivalent. Why? Because you can follow it with any number of B's and it will remain in language. And if you follow it with an A, it is not in the language, right?
Yes.
So the equivalence class of this is A star B star, B plus. Plus means, by the way, notation plus is B catenated with B star, huh? At least one B. Repetition, this says star says 0 or more repetitions of this, plus says 1 or more repetitions. Huh? This is a standard notation. So I will use it here. I could have written it as A star B dot B star. Okay. So this is the equivalence class of A star B, which is also the equivalence class of just string B. And what is the third class? Anything that takes you out of this language after getting a B. So A star B, B star, followed by an A, followed by sigma star. Because after getting at least one B, if you get a further A, you are permanently out of R, right? So these are all the remaining strings, and between this they cover all the strings of sigma star. You can see that any string in sigma star will be here. So this is how you construct it. This is the intuitive definition. A more direct definition is construct an automaton for this. So I will have an automaton epsilon. I will skip till I get an A. This is the final state, right? This is my state 0. On getting a B, I will go to another state and there I can absorb any number of B's. But after this B, if I get an A, I go to a reject state and then on either A or B, I stay here. So this is my automaton. Now I can easily see that this is actually a minimal automaton because I cannot equate any two states of this automaton. So I'm going to have three classes in the language induced equivalence for this because it is same as the number of states in the minimum automaton. Okay, and what will be the things corresponding to this? What are the strings which take me from initial state to this state? It is A star. How can I reach this state from the initial state? On all strings of the form A star, I remain there. What are the strings which take me to this state? A star followed by a B followed by any number of B's. So A star, B, B star, which was exactly what we had got here. And what are the strings which take me here? Well, I have to reach here and then I should do an A. So it is A star, B, B star, A followed by anything. So sigma star, A plus B whole star. So these are my three classes, right? So there are two ways of getting this. So you got that? By the way, have I started recording? Yes, that's very good. So there are two or three questions about finding this right linear equivalent. Language induced equivalence. And the important thing is that the language induced equivalence classes give you the states of the minimum automaton, which is also found by the Hopcroft algorithm. Okay. Any questions here? Hi, any? So if there are no questions, I will go to homework 2, question 9. What is this question? Question 9. If you want to ask any other questions, you have to ask, but I think we should move on. So there are these three languages. You know, A is language A raised to n, B raised to m, where n is greater than equal to m. Here it's same A raised to n, B raised to m with n greater than equal to m, but the number of m is at most 10. And the third one is n greater than equal to m, but m is at least 10. Okay. Now you have to tell me whether these are regular languages or not regular languages. So who have we got in the class? So I have written those languages here also. So anybody wants to have a go? Tell me whether the first language is regular or not. What do you think, Rani?
Yes, sir.
Is it regular or not?
It's not regular.
How would you, I mean, I have not asked you in this question, but if you have to prove, how would you prove it is not regular?
Sir, using pumping lemma.
Right. So for pumping lemma, let's give it a try. So A is let me write in black so that the question becomes different from. So A is not regular. Regular, right? What is the how will we use pumping lemma? So first step is that daemon chooses K, right? He says it's K, regular, and he chooses K. Our answer is we should choose some string in this language which cannot be long string and some subpart of it which cannot be pumped. So any idea what should we choose as the string? Basically, we have to choose UVW, 3 substrings, such that UVW belongs to the language. So what should we choose as U? Rani, any idea? I think I called it XYZ. I didn't call it UVW, right? Basically, we have to choose 3 strings XYZ such that the catenation, this is not Z, this has to be some W, right? X catenated with Y catenated with Z belongs to the language. And what is the other condition? The size of Y should be. Rani, do you remember what is the condition on Y?
Yes, sir.
It's greater than equal to K,
It's
right?
greater than K. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's a long word with a long subword which we claim cannot be pumped. Whereas daemon will claim that it will be able, he will be able, if it is of length greater than equal to K, he will be able to pump it. Whereas we will choose one Y which cannot be pumped. So what should we choose for XYZ? Okay, it's a bit of a guesswork, but we want to basically, by pumping we'll change the number of letters. So we better choose the pumpable part to be such that it will create mismatch between this N and M. Right? So firstly, I have to choose this X, Y, Z. So I'll choose X as, I'll help you. Choose X as epsilon. Choose Y as A raised to N and Z as B raised to M. N, sorry. You are allowed to choose any word which is in this language. So you choose this. Sorry, not N. I'm so sorry. It is K chosen by the daemon. So choose this word, and we give this long word to the daemon, and we claim that this is not pumpable, right?
Yes, sir.
Why do we do that? Because by pumping we can change this string Y to something else by adding some extra letters, by repeating some of the substring here. And if you change the number of A's, you will not get A raised to K, B raised to K. You will get some A raised to K plus 3. If you pump some 3 times, right? So do you get the intuition?
Yes, sir. I got it.
Yeah, but formally we have to write this. The next step is daemons, right? So what daemon will do is it will split this Y into UVW, okay? Which will look like this, which will look like, let's say, A raised to I, A raised to J, A raised to K. So he splits this A raised to K Y into 3, sorry, not J, L, into three substrings, one containing IJL, where you have necessarily that I plus J plus L gives you K, and J has to be greater than 0. right? Because this middle part has to be non-empty. This is the condition of pumping lemma. So daemon is required to give you some arbitrary IJL which satisfies this condition. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Now you can either pump down by removing this a raised to j2 by taking 0 as my power. So you choose pumping index, pumping index. I called it in the lecture I have already used, so instead of let me use here P. Pumping index I equal to, I can choose which one. What should I use? I can use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever is convenient to you, so that the resulting string stops being in language. So I will use 0. Okay. I can even pump down. Which means what? According to pumping lemma, this string to the power I must be also in the language, right? But if I choose I to be 0, I get the string, instead of Y, I get the string a raised to P, then a raised to j to the power 0, which means epsilon string. So this is not there, and I get a raised to L, and before that was epsilon, the x part, and the z part was b raised to k. But I know that p plus L is less than k. So I get a string with less a's than b's, and that is not in the language. So daemon was wrong. So this is how we prove it. Okay. So I think this is clear to you. What about B? Is it regular? Arvind?
Yes, sir. I managed to draw a DFA.
Okay. Yes, it is regular. And the easiest way to see it is, as a regular expression. You can do a case split. You can take m to be 0, m to be 1, and m to be 2. There are 3 cases, right? So m equal to 0, and it will be the disjoint union of these 3 cases, right? So in first case where m is equal to 0, you will get the language a star, right? A to the power n for arbitrary n greater than equal to 0. And there will have to be no b's, right? So for m equal to 0, I will get this. The other case is, so I'll write a regular expression. I have got m is equal to 1. So I have a language of the form a to the power, at least one a followed by a star and then a single b, right? Because I've chosen m to be 1. And the third case is I have got 2 b's at the end. So I'm allowed to have 0b, 1b or 2b at the end because m is equal to 2. And so how many a's am I allowed? In first case I can have arbitrary number of a's. Here I should have at least one a. Here what should I have, Rani? How many a's at least?
Sir, 2 A's at
So
least.
and so how will I write it? 2 a's followed by
A star.
Correct, perfect. And this regular expression is for this language. So this language is regular. I think Arvind drew a DFA for it, which is with a similar intuition, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Split it
so
by
great.
case and
So great. You got
you'll
both
have
of
like separate stems.
So this is regular, right? This is not regular. By the way, this happens to be context free. So you should be able to write a grammar for this, huh? Yeah. And the third one, what do you think? Is it regular or not? So Rani, I'm sorry I keep coming back to you because there are only 2 of you here.
Not regular, I think, sir.
Right. And how will we prove it? The same way.
Yes,
In
sir.
fact, exactly the same proof will work. Let daemon choose a k and you choose the string a raised to k, b raised to k, right?
Yes, sir.
Provided it is larger, that k that daemon chooses is larger than 2. If daemon chooses k equal to 1, you still choose a raised to 2, b raised to 2. Okay? And then you will give the same argument that you gave here. So this is not regular, right? And in fact, also context free. So you should be able to give grammar for this. Okay, we've done that example. And I think that, okay, that finishes the regular part. And I want to move to homework. I think this is homework 3, no?
Yes. Can you also do homework to problem 4?
Yeah, okay, I'll do it for you. Yeah, please. Anybody else also, if you want me to solve something else, you ask. Consider the language parent. Describe the equivalence classes under language induced equivalence, right? For equivalence parent. Okay. So what is the parent? Okay, I'll do that. Page before.
Yes, sir. We like studied parent under CFL, but
yeah. So parent is language of balance parenthesis. Huh? Language of balance parenthesis. What are those parentheses? This and this, right? So words like this will be there. Bracket, bracket, left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket, right? It has two properties. You know, as you read the string from left to right, the number of left brackets should be larger than or equal to the number of right brackets always, you know, for any prefix. And at the end, they should be equal, right? There can be an unbalanced. I mean, I could have string like this. So this will remain unbalanced till I reach the end, right? So such strings are in the balanced parenthesis language. Now, what are the equivalence classes for this? So Arvind, suppose I've got a string like this and I've got this string. Are these equivalent? That is my question to you. Are these language equivalent or parent equivalent? I will write this. Okay, let me write it properly. Are these parent equivalent? This left bracket, right bracket, and left bracket. Is there any word by which you can extend this and it will take you to the language, but the right hand side will not take you to the language? Can it happen?
Equivalent, because I mean we only have two letters and
yeah, and there is an imbalance of one.
Yes. So
right?
If you give a right bracket, it will become accepted, but if you give a left bracket,
or if you give, you know, I've got left bracket, right bracket. After this, if I get a right bracket and then I give any balanced parenthesis string, no? Huh? Same thing I can do here. So these are equivalent, right? Rani, is that clear? Why these two are equivalent?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Right. So that should give you an idea of, you know, what are the equivalence classes. Basically, you count, you know, given two strings. If the count of left bracket in a word W minus the count of right bracket in the W is 1 here, and it is 1 here also, is equal to K, then you get a class called HK. Okay. So HK is the class of all strings where the difference is, and this has to be greater than equal to 0. K greater than equal to 0. Then for each of such K, you get one equivalence class. So a string left bracket, right bracket, left bracket, right bracket, left bracket is also equivalent to left bracket, right? Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
So each HK basically counts the number of left brackets minus number of right brackets. That is the pending number of left brackets to be added, you know, in the remaining string, right? And that gives you one equivalence class. And there is one more class where, you know, for some prefix, one more class called rest, where for some prefix, the count of left bracket in that prefix X, you know, for some prefix X of W is less than the count of right bracket in X, right? So somewhere you violated the balance parenthesis property in this word W that you are considering. They belong to this class called rest. So all you know, words which have already violated, you know, this property of balance parenthesis. See, because in these equivalence classes we are allowed to consider incomplete words, but they should still be candidates. So rest will consist all of broken words with the number of left brackets for some prefix of this W that we are considering. So rest will consist of all W's such that for some prefix X of W, the number of left brackets is less than the number of right brackets. So you exceeded the right brackets over the left bracket, and so it can never be in parent language, no matter what you extend it with. So we have got all for every K, one HK class and one rest class, the remaining strings. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. But notationally, I mean, is it okay if we just write prefix of W and leave it.
Yeah. You don't have to be very formal. Till you explain the idea, it's good enough. So you can
Yes,
write
sir.
like
That was
this.
the main question actually.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
otherwise this follows from the definition.
Right. And so how many equivalence classes?
Infinite.
And this is a no, context-free language, not a regular language. So this Mahil-Niro language entity equivalence, another way of showing that a language is not regular. Pumping lemma is one more way. There are two ways we have. Okay? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that's done. Next, homework 3. So I will remove this and I will open homework 3. Where is HW3? Okay, homework 3. There are some questions. 12 questions. By the way, if you study this homework question and practice questions, go over the quiz questions and go through the class material a little bit. I think you should be able to crack 80% of the end sem. Okay, and there will be some thinking questions. So it's in your favor to this. So we need to give a context-free grammar for the language a raised to n, b raised to 2n. That is the number of string is of the form a star b star, where the number of b's is twice the number of a's. This is the language. So is the language clear, Rani?
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Now let's start designing the language. So any suggestion? By the way, what is the grammar for a raised to n, b raised to n? Simpler language. A raised to n, b raised to n. What is the grammar? Do you recall? So let's design this now. Start symbol should go to what? So suppose any s gives you a string of this form and you want to construct larger strings which have this form also. So write for s any string which belongs to which is of this form. Now to get a larger string which is also in the language, what can we do to this s? You can add an a before the string which is in s, add a b after that string in s, and you will still get a string in s, right? So this kind of recursion is there. So if you get any string of the form a raised to n, b raised to n, and append a previous a to it as following b to it, the resulting string will remain in a raised to s. So s is the class of all string which is closed under this kind of constructions. And how? But what is the smallest string which can be in s? Any idea? What is the shortest string which can be in this language?
Put an epsilon.
Okay, so epsilon. Can anything else be in this language? And now every string in this language can be derived with this grammar. It's clear, right? If there are n a's, you apply this rule n times, right? So you will get a raised to n, s, b raised to n. That is what you will go by successively applying this rule. So you will do s goes to a, s, b, then you apply this to you. This s will get replaced by a, s, b. So you will get a, s, b, b, and you do this totally n times, you will get a raised to n, s, b raised to n. Now you apply the epsilon rule and you get a raised to n, b raised to n. So this is actually a derivation of the string a raised to n, b raised to n in this grammar. So every string, any string of this form can be derived in this grammar. And if, grammar derives a string of the, okay, and the grammar only derives strings of the form a raised to n, b raised to n. Why? Because epsilon is of that form. And if assuming that a string x is of that form, by applying this rule, you will still get a string which is of this form, right? It is. So this is a kind of inductive argument. Assuming that s contains a string of this form, this larger string formed by this rule will also be of this form. So this is how we have designed this language for a raised to n, b raised. Now what about this language? What kind of grammar? So Rani, you want to give a try?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what? Certainly epsilon will be in the language by taking n equal to 0. So it will be there. Now suppose there is something which is in of this form, and then we want to make a larger string. What should we do?
A, S, B, B.
Correct. Exactly. And anything else? So first check that every string of this form can be derived here, right? So suppose the string is from a cube b to the power 6. You know, we will apply this rule 3 times and then this epsilon rule like here and we'll get it. So every string of this form can be derived in this grammar. That is clear?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Yeah, and the converse, if you derive any string in this grammar, it will be of this form. Why? Because the smallest string you derive epsilon has this form, and assuming that anything in S, you know, say X, which belongs to S has that property, this larger string AXBB also has that property, right? So somehow this rule is closed under this property. That is assuming that a substring has this property in S, this larger string which also belongs to the language will have that property. So I think it is clear. So I think this is the answer. Very good. So I think we solved that question. What is the next question I want to do? So this is the grammar for a raised to n, b raised to 2n, right? This is the grammar that we got. Okay, very good. Next. Okay, we need to convert this grammar into Chomsky normal form. Now, what is Chomsky normal form, Arvind?
So each production can have only 2 non-terminals, or like it can go from one non-terminal to a terminal.
Right. So it will either go to form AB or it will go to some S goes to some small letter A, terminal A, right? So rules like this, and if all rules are like that, it is in Chomsky normal form. What is our systematic procedure for constructing this? Step 1 is what?
You need to like add all the, I mean,
but there is a name for it.
Eliminate in a sense all the epsilon and unit productions.
Right.
You're not like eliminating that directly, but
no, add and then eliminate. Right.
Yes.
Unit and epsilon productions. Right. So the way to do it is wherever this T occurs, which is a unit production, anything implied by its right hand side you add as a rule, right? So substitute this T by its right hand side because this is a unit production, right? So the new grammar we will get is S goes to what? A S A, B S B, then S goes to T and T goes to SS. So we will directly write S goes to A SS right? But by saying S goes to T and T goes to SS, I directly make A goes to, you know, oh, sorry. What am I doing? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. S goes to T and T goes to SS. So I directly make S goes to SS, right? Because S goes to T, which in turn goes to SS. I add this direct as a direct rule. So I get SS. Similarly, S goes to T and T goes to epsilon. So I add epsilon also, right? You got that? And then what else do I have to add?
So we what need else? To like remove that epsilon production somehow.
That's right. So for epsilon removal, if T goes to epsilon and S goes to, so this is what I have. But I need to also add productions of the form AA and BB. Why is that? Because S goes to T and T goes to epsilon. So I can remove this S here. Why? Because S can be written by epsilon, right? So I will write a production where S is removed. So anything that goes to epsilon, I will have a production with that S removed. So I will get this two productions, S goes to AA and S goes to BB also. So this is the new grammar that I get. And of course I have this stupid T goes to SS and T goes to T goes to SS and T goes to epsilon still remaining, right? So this is my extended grammar. I obtained by adding rules which doesn't change the language. Agreed? This was our step 1. And then as a part of step 1B, what do we do? All the unit production. So I also had it. This goes to T. This was there because that remains. If S goes to T.
S goes to S because S goes to SS can be reduced to epsilon, right?
Yeah. So I can have S goes to S also if you like. Agreed? Now all the unit productions in this, S goes to T and S goes to S, I remove. Okay. All the epsilon productions I remove from this extended grammar. So I will get the grammar S goes to A as A, B as B. I will get SS, epsilon will go, AA will remain, BB will remain, and these are unit productions. S goes to T or S goes to S, right? So this is the rules that I get for S by removing unit productions and epsilon rules here. T goes to SS will remain. T goes to epsilon will go because that's an epsilon production. But you can see on the left hand side there is no occurrence of T. So T becomes a useless symbol, right? It's not a reachable symbol. So this we can remove. So this is the grammar that we get after step 1, where we remove unit and epsilon productions. And this grammar will give you a same language as original grammar minus this string epsilon. You will not be able to derive epsilon here, but everything else it will derive. This was our step 1. What was step 2?
Sir, but in this question, the start symbol is not specified, right? It can start with T.
No. I mean, by convention, S is always the start symbol unless specified otherwise. This is the convention we use. So here I have not given a list of non-terminals which you can derive from this grammar. List of terminals, you can see these rules and know what it is. And S is always the start symbol unless specified otherwise.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. What is step 2? Convert terminals to non-terminals. Huh? To non-terminals, because you cannot have a mixture of terminal and non-terminal, right? So how do we do that? For small a we will write a capital A. So S goes to capital A, S capital A. For small b we will write B, S capital B. This is a new non-terminal. SS. Then I've got double A and double B. And I have 2 extra productions. A goes to small a and B goes to small b. This is almost in Chomsky normal form, but there are these productions of length 3. Do you see that? And in Chomsky normal form, this cannot be there. Otherwise, these are okay. These are of length 2. So what do we do? For the trailing string, we introduce a new symbol, right? So that is step 3. By the way, this step 2 will give you the same language as the previous step grammar. Huh? The end of previous step give you the same one, because you just sort of gone, instead of directly writing small a, we have written capital A, which can only be written as small a. So it will take 2 steps instead of 1 step to get this. Okay. In step 3, what do? We call this trailing part as a new symbol called C, and this trailing part as new symbol called D. So I will get rules like S goes to AC or BD, because I am calling this SB pair as D, or SS or AA or BB. Then of course A goes to A, B goes to B, and then I have to write productions for C. So C goes to SA, because I renamed this SA by C, and D goes to SB. And this is my grammar in Chomsky normal form. Okay. So is the conversion clear? Any doubts? I think this is easy, right? Okay. No question is coming, so I will go ahead. Okay. Question number 10. Which says that the string of the form WW, where W is an arbitrary string in AB star, is not context free. So how do we show it, Arvind?
Sir, didn't we do this in class?
We did this?
Yes.
Okay. So right. What string did we take? We used pumping lemma, right?
Yes, we took.
Still, I'll go over it a little bit. In pumping lemma, first step is what? Daemon chooses K. Okay, next step is what? We choose?
What letter have we used?
Z.
We have used VWX.
Yeah, well, Z equal to U, VWXY, right? So view Z, let us say U alpha Y, right?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think what we do is we just choose Z belonging to the language. And what is the condition on Z? Length of Z should be
Greater than K.
greater than equal to K, right? So we choose a long string which we claim is not pumpable, right? Here we don't play that trick that we give a long word and a long subword. That doesn't work anymore in context-free grammar. We just give a long string in the language which cannot be pumped. Okay? So at that point, daemon will do what? So what string do we want to choose in this case? For this?
In class, we took I mean, almost any string will work, but in class, we specifically took A power K, B power K as W. So you'll have to repeat
No,
it
no,
once.
no, no. A power K, B power K,
Yes.
A power K, B power K is my whole string, right? Z,
Yes.
right? Now daemon has many ways of splitting this, right? Daemon splits Z equal to UVWXY, right? In 5 parts, correct? Such that he claims that this middle part VWX can be pumped. That is, so that strings of the form V raised to I W, X raised to I, XY. This is also in, if this is in the language, this is also in the language. That is what he claims. He says, yeah, I will be able to split it like this. What are the extra conditions on VWX?
Mod of VWX should be less than K. Less than
Less
equal
than
to K.
equal to K. And there's one more. Vx cannot be
Vx
epsilon.
should be greater than 0.
Right. It cannot be epsilon. So otherwise, you pump it, the string will not change. Right? These are the conditions. So what do we want? We should allow daemon to choose any 5-part split of this. Now there are too many different splits. So we'll argue case by case. Right? So case 1 would be that all these UVW XY is in the A raised to K part. Right? So VWX belongs to initial A raised to K part, right? So your U is epsilon and VWX belongs to let us say this A raised to K part. That is what we argue, right? No, U need not be epsilon, right? But basically this VWX string belongs to this first part. In that case, by pumping U up, you will only increase the number of A's, correct? And you can give argument at this level, qualitative level. You don't have to use lot of symbols. Okay? So it belongs to this part, A raised to K, B raised to K, A raised to K, B raised to K. I've underlined the part in which VWX belongs, right? To the underlined part. In that case, pumping up will do what, Arvind?
It will distort this whole
Yeah, I mean, it will
W.
increase the number of A's,
Yes.
right? Because that VWX belongs to A raised to K part, it only this VX part only consists of A's, and by pumping A's, you will increase the A's. Will make string A raised to M, B raised to K, A raised to K, B raised to K with M greater than K, right? So this is case, this was easy case. Suppose it overlaps A and B. Case 2. VWX is here. A raised to K, B raised to K, A raised to K, B raised to K, and it overlaps some A raised to K, B. So it has some A's followed by some B's. VWX consists of, so I can split the whole string in following from A raised to I, A raised to J, A raised to L, B raised to M, B raised to N, and then what is there? So that finishes my middle K, and then I have got A raised to K, B raised to K, where this part is UVW. So this is my U, this is my V, and this is my W, right? This is X and this is Y. Oh, it need not finish here. So there may be some other B's also. So P, right? So this is my Y. Okay. So I've got in this UVW part some A raised to J followed by A raised to L, B raised to M in the V part, and W part contains of some B raised to N, and then the remaining string is here. So now you can see by pumping this part again you will get a string which is not in this. Okay. So you can argue like this and you can finish the argument. I think we did this in the class. So let's skip this. But there are many cases. You don't have to do all cases. You say similar, other cases are similar. करके बोल दो. Okay. I have got a language number, alphabet is AB and number of A's should be equal to number of B's. So you know words like A, BB as well as AB both are in the language. Huh? And I want a push down automaton which recognizes this. So shall we solve that? I think we'll do the Turing machine part in the next tutorial. By the way, those of you who are present, will you be able to attend one more tutorial on Friday?
Yes, sir.
Rani, Prashant, Eshu?
Yes, sir.
We will do the Turing machine part then, because today we couldn't finish the fourth this thing, but let's do this. So what kind of push down automaton will recognize equal number of A's and B's? Any?
Sir, I had a question about the I mean, like the notation used in the question in this question, 11th one.
Yeah.
This is homework 3, right? Not 2.
This is homework 3.
Yes. So in the 11th question here, like there's an additional letter $.
No, sorry. Oh, no. In question 11, there is a typo. The alphabet is A hash B. Hash is an additional letter. The dollar is a typo because you see the rules are only on A, B and hash. Hash is the marker, middle marker in the string.
Yes, so hash symbol needn't always denote that any letter from sigma.
No. Where is that convention?
Like in regular expression, we had used that convention, right?
No. That was just for illustration. Hash is any symbol. If you like, convert this hash to some other special marker symbol called dollar. It doesn't matter. It's just a symbol which is different from A and B. Okay?
Yes.
And there's a typo in this thing. Sigma consists of A, hash and B. 3 symbols. Not A, dollar and B. Huh? So would you please correct it? So this was question 11. But I am doing 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If I do 12, I think you will be able to do 11 yourself. It's not difficult. Okay. So let's go back to 12, where we want all words with number of A's equal to number of B's in word W equal to number of B's in word W. All set W's. You know, we want to collect. So how do we? What is the idea? How can we use stack and intuitively, you know, basically, so what is the scheme? So what we can do is, as we get an A, you know, we can push it on the stack, right? Is that correct? As we get a B, you know, having already got some A's, we can cancel it for B's which are on the top of the stack. Do you agree, Arvind?
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't matter till the number of A's we have got so far is larger than equal to the number of B's. We'll always be able to do this, right?
Yes,
the difficulty is if the B's overtake A's, then what should we do?
We should add them to the stack and check if the stack is not empty and if there's a B, then we should cancel the A and B.
Okay. So the property I want is of the stack is the following. Stack contains a symbol capital A raised to K followed by bottom if and only if number of A's seen in the word so far. Let W be the word which is scanned so far. You know, in a configuration, we will have processed some number of letters and arrived at this stack, right? Well, so W is the part of the word which is scanned so far, minus the number of B's scanned in the word is equal to K, which is greater than equal to 0. So if the if suppose I've got a word A, B, A, B, B, A, okay, and then there are some more letters B, A, B, 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 right? And I've scanned up to here. So far, how many A's have I seen? I've seen 4 A's and 2 B's, right? So I've seen a surplus of 2 A's. So I will push on the stack 2 A's. And how will I do it? The idea is this: every time I see an A, my stack initially contains bottom. Every time I see an A, I push a capital A on top of the stack. Then when I see a B, I cancel off that A from the stack. Then if I see another A, I push an A on top of the stack. I see another A, I push another A on the top of it. Then if I see a B, I cancel this off. And if I see another A, I push this thing. So till my number of A's is larger than equal to number of B's, and the excess is K, I will have K A's on the top of my stack. This is one property I will use. But this is not something that can happen always. If in the part of the string I have seen so far, if the number of B exceeds number of A's, and stack will contain B, another symbol called B raised to K bottom, if and only if number of B's minus number of A's is equal to K, which is greater than 0. So if A's exceed B, then my stack will contain, A's only. If B's exceed A, then the stack will contain only B's. And once the number of A's and B's are equal, they will cancel off and stack will have bottom. Then if I get a B, I'll push a B there. So what kind of rules will I write? Can somebody give me the rules? So I'll have a single state automaton, because single state, okay. And my rules will be delta. Okay, I'll write the rules in blank. Delta, if I get a symbol A and on the top stack is, just contains bottom, which means the number of A's and B's seen so far is equal. Of course, so far I've only seen string epsilon, so they are equal. So what should I do? I should, I'm sorry, it has to be a 3 tuple. Of course, that state part is redundant, S A bottom. I will stay in state S. And what will I rewrite the stack by, Arvind?
Capital A.
Capital A bottom. Bottom
Yes.
will remain. Okay. If I similarly delta S B bottom, I will push what? B bottom.
B bottom.
Right, because now B's exceed A. Right? Bottom means so far I've seen equal number of A's and B's, and then I got a B, I put a B. Now if delta S A, and if I'm seeing an A on top of the stack, which is number of A's is exceeding number of B's, or equal to, and I see an A, so I will push an, what will I push?
Another A.
So I will get AA, right, in place of single A. Whatever is below will remain, but this top A will get replaced by 2A. And delta S, if I see B with an A at the top, what do I do? Because I have A at the top.
Go back to bottom.
Not bottom. This A I cancel. Epsilon. And whatever is below will remain. So if I have 3 A's, I'll get 2 A's. Because 1 B has been squared off. Right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So delta S, A and a B if I have, then what do I do?
Again, same S comma epsilon.
Yeah, and delta S, B and a B.
You
S,
push it so
BB.
B. I mean.
So by
B.
doing this at the end of the word, what will be left on the stack?
There should be an epsilon in the stack, because I mean, like, there should be an epsilon transition which consume the stack bottom symbol.
Let's say I don't have to go to T. I can just remain in S and I can put an epsilon. And this automaton will accept by empty stack, right? So it will reach some configuration S epsilon epsilon if number of A's is equal to number of B's. If it is not the case, then it will end the word with stack non-empty, right? That is what will happen. The string will get over, but the stack will become non-empty, right? If the word doesn't have equal number of A's and B's. So this is my push down automaton. You have designed it, right? Okay, and in 11 I'm giving you actually a push down automaton. Please, this dollar is actually hash, huh? My mistake. You have to figure out what language it accepts, and you have to give a run in terms of configurations of these automata on this word. So just to make clear what is configuration, if I go back to my previous slide, oops, not this, this is over now. If I go back to this slide, what would be a run of this automaton on, let us say, a word AB? So I will draw this in blue. So my initial configuration will be what? I'll be in state S, and my word to be processed is the full word AB, and on the stack is just the bottom, right? And in one step, what will happen? What will be the next configuration, Rani? Do you recall?
Yes, sir.
So my next configuration, the state will be S. What will be the remaining word to be processed? A will be processed. So B will remain, right?
B, yes, sir.
And on the stack, what will come?
A.
A bottom. This
So
bottom
B.
is being replaced by A bottom. So two symbols will come. Okay. And then in one step, now I've got a word B, right? So which rule will apply?
Sir, yes, B, A bottom, yes, sir. Yes, B, A.
Because at the top is an A, right? And my symbol is B. So B, seeing A on the top, I replace the A symbol on the top by epsilon and I remain in S. So I get S, epsilon, and A gets replaced by epsilon. So I get bottom here, right? Now
Yes,
what
sir.
do I do? I apply this rule. Because I'm at the end of the string, this is the only rule that I can apply, right? And that I can apply only if there is bottom. If there is any other symbol, I will get stuck. So since I have bottom, I can replace it by S epsilon epsilon, right? In one step. And so this is a run which accepts by empty stack. And so the word AB is accepted. Like that, in that other automaton in the homework question, you have to first figure out the language that is accepted by this automaton, and you have to give run on this word AB hash BA. Okay. And that will give you enough, this run will give you enough idea of what the language is like. So that's what you answer. Okay. So I think from my point of view, we have covered some questions of this homework 3. If you have any doubts, you can ask me now or you can ask in the Q&A section. And we have not done questions on Turing machines. Now, the last 2 lectures of Turing machines I have not given in the class. I have recorded them and released them about, I think, 5-6 days ago. So you can find them on the web page, go through those, and then do the homework exercises for the last part. And we will solve some of those in the next class on Friday as usual. You are okay having a class on Friday, right? According to the timetable, 5th is the last day of instruction. Anyway, I will record the class. So if you are not able to join the class, at least you will have it available. Okay? Any questions for those who are present? Okay, if there are no questions, then I will stop recording.